Hello, friends, and welcome back to another episode of the Mindful Constitution podcast. Today, I'm here with Michael LoColle, who I met at the North Shore Wellness Expo that I did in November. And he was wonderful. And so I wanted to reach out and have him on the podcast because he is a men's transformational coach. And I really love integrating more male voices to the podcast because we have a lot of females that hop on here. So it's always cool to have those different perspectives, especially in the realm of healing and sober curiosity, because Michael has also gone on a sober curious path of his own. He is co-owner of the Danvers Wellness Center as well. So local to me here in the North Shore. So hello, hello. How are
Hi,
you?
thank you. I'm good. Thank you so much for having me on. Appreciate it.
Yeah, you're so welcome. So, I want to talk about quite a few things today, but I just want to open up with what I usually open up with, which is sharing a little bit about yourself and your path to where you currently are. So, what led you down the path of health, wellness, and healing? What led you to your own entrepreneurial journey and
Yeah.
business creation?
Okay. Yeah. Wow. I got to
Just
go back
starting
about
with light questions,
just that's the light question. I just got to go back about 16 years and look back at my corporate history there. I came from corporate, so I worked for a big corporate company in Boston. Some of the companies that I worked for private companies, corporate companies prior to that, were all corporate companies, and it was great. It paid really well, but I knew that I never really vibed in that environment. There was something missing, and I had no idea what it was. Um, during, let's see, I'll kind of fast forward a little bit, but during 2009, we had a huge market crash, and I was working for a big finance company, insurance company. I'll leave them nameless, but they're a very big company in Boston. Little JH, maybe something like that. I won't spell it out, right? Huge company and stuff. And during that crash, I was one of 133 people that got laid off on a Friday morning. And during that time, I had spent the 3 months prior to that doing personal training. So I was doing that more so as a hobby, but I kept asking the universe, like, how can I do this full time? I don't really like my job. And they obviously heard me because I got laid off a Friday morning and it was a 55-minute drive home. By the time I got home, I had a whole business plan in place in my head of how I was going to take my hobby and turn it into a full-fledged business. You fast forward 9 months, 10 months, it's running at full time hours at this point. I took personal training. I was running fitness boot camps. I expanded one location into two locations like 10 months later. And about 2 years in, I had four boot camp locations. I was doing personal training. I was doing nutrition coaching. So it was kind of like a fast and furious pace that I was on. And it was exciting. It was new. It was that new thing that came in for me. And I loved it. So that was like my introduction to entrepreneurship and to business ownership. Was the first time I had done anything like that. But prior to that, I always had kind of had that mentality.
Hmm.
My mindset was always that of a business owner. And if I all those companies that I worked for, not to mention, I always worked my way up into a management role or an operations role or a district vice president role. So I always had that leadership role embedded in me. So it
Hmm.
was that thing where I was like, there's something there. And then I was given the opportunity. I love the fact that I had all those experiences with those companies because it gave me the structure, the groundwork that I needed, and all the training per se, hands on, because I didn't go to college, right? But those companies gave me the training that I needed to actually build my business because I learned how to lead. I learned how to manage. I learned how to organize. I learned how to project manage. I learned how to bill and do all these things that I would have never known how to do. So I got kind of like free training while getting paid.
Hmm.
It kind of prepped me for the entrepreneur world, you know? So yeah, that was kind of a very intense time in my life. Those first 2 to 4 years were just, I was so immersed, so embedded into what I was doing, you
Hmm.
know? Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Yeah,
A lot of
absolutely.
stress, but a lot of fun.
I know. That's like that. the ups and the downs of entrepreneurship are pretty
Yeah.
wild. It's like a deep
Yep.
dive into not just the logistics of business ownership, but I feel
Hmm.
also for me personally, I don't know if this resonates for you, but it was definitely a slap in the face with all like the inner
Oh,
work too, because
yes.
I feel like in order to have the confidence, especially in health and wellness as the face of your brand and business, and like
Hmm.
you are um the what do they call patient the like first patient
Oh, yeah.
itself, right? And like
Yes.
I, I feel patient zero or something.
Right. Right.
But
I'm not just a client. I'm not just the president. I'm also a client. So
it,
that commercial that was way back in the day, something
oh
tagline
really?
like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But it is. It's like that. It's like you are your own best like advertising. And so there's a lot of pressure and I for me too with social media and putting myself out there. It's just it was a lot of diving into my own insecurities and fear of judgment
Oh,
and being seen and
yeah.
those
I,
things.
I spent a lot of time in that first, I call it the first initial phase of my entrepreneurship business life. Um, Still wearing a mask.
Hmm.
I did some work. It wasn't really the depth of the work. And then about, you know, taking that business model of like health and wellness with you, very much physical, right? Personal training, running boot camps, doing the nutrition stuff. And then about 5, 6 years ago, really embedding myself into like the energy work and then
Hmm.
really on myself. And the first time I look back, the first time I did Reiki, I had to look at a journal. It was close to 15 years ago now. And
Wow,
I had to
really?
remind myself that that was the first time I ever did Reiki, that somebody did Reiki on me. And I was like, wow, I didn't think it was that long ago, but something was obviously calling me to it years ago. And I
Yeah.
only just started working with it in the last 5 years, you
Yeah.
know? Um, and it was, you fast forward where I got the real in-depth work was in the last 5 years. I
Wow.
had to, yeah, because then I started coaching clients and one-on-one in that spiritual world. And I started getting more into the energy work
Mhm.
and the shamanic journeys that I was running for clients and the meditations. And the deeper I went with clients, there was no way I couldn't go deeper with myself. And it
Mhm.
was like like at the same time I was working with clients, I was peeling back so many layers of my own stuff that was going on inside myself. So I got the real slap in the face. I got quite a few slaps in the face over the last 16 years of business. That's for sure. There's no
Just
doubt
like a
there.
couple a year, you know?
But I would say that the intense ones came about maybe 5 years ago. So
Yeah.
yeah.
It's funny too when you look back and you're like, oh, I was working with clients with then like clients then and
Mhm.
obviously you have something to offer every person that's attracted to you, but it is
Right.
interesting to watch yourself develop and realize that, in order to fully provide people what they deserve, you do
Yeah.
need to be walking in integrity with that
Hmm.
yourself. And that's what
Exactly.
catalyzed my sober curious path because I was wanting to start my business. I'm like, I can't take myself seriously with this drinking. Like, why would anyone else? So
It
it's funny.
That's so true. Yeah. I
Yeah.
made that realization some time ago. And I was like, I need to stop. Like I
Hmm.
just need to stop. I gotta make this decision just to stop doing certain things because I'm not being taken seriously. So is
Hmm.
it these things or is it the behavior that comes along with these things? It's all these little things that add up. You dissect stuff as coaches.
Yeah. I know. I guess too, it's interesting you said that you went to your first Reiki session like 15 years ago because when I was envisioning your path, I made this assumption that you were like into physical training and then like somewhere along the way it evolved into like a spiritual journey. And that was my own projection because that's what happened for me, where I feel like I
Sure.
started really paying attention to my diet. So I did nutrition and then I realized like if I'm paying attention to my diet, why am I
Mhm.
binge drinking? And
Right.
then and then when I removed the alcohol, it kind of catalyzed a spiritual awakening. But can you share
Yeah.
more about like your evolution of like physical, mental, emotional,
Sure.
spiritual health?
Yeah. You know, being a guy, I look back and I can remember when I was 17 years old, I was walking around Salem, Mass. And you know, all the bookstores they have there and the witch shops and everything, right? So I was in one of those stores and I picked up my first tarot deck, my first crystals, stones. And I purchased my first tarot deck at the age of 17.
Hmm.
So I loved that stuff even back then. I was always intrigued by it, always interested in it. I never really fully delved into it, but it's funny. I bring that tarot deck home, I open it, and I go through it, and then I don't really know what to do with it. And then it's this, oh, but I'm a guy, and my friends are looking at me, and this is going to seem weird to them. Well, I should probably put this away. And then I spent years hiding behind my body, right? Build your body up. Nobody can see the inside of you. So it was this pattern of just like constantly wearing that mask. But every so often, in between all those years, I'd get called to do something spiritual. It was always this like weird, like crossing paths of
Hmm.
like, hey, you're bringing it in, you're getting called from the physical into the spiritual realm. And yeah, my path when I got called to it, it was just a friend who was like, hey, I know somebody who's doing this energy work. And I'm like, oh, that sounds really interesting. And I had gone secretly to psychics before and all that stuff, you know, and had cards read and whatnot. And she's like, I have this friend. She needs to practice. She'll give you 6 sessions, really, really cheap. And I said, sure, why not? I was always that guy that was like, sure, why not? You know? And my first session blew my mind. And it was like I was hooked from that moment, but
Hmm.
I was still so immersed in the heavy drinking. And I was still so immersed in my toxic behaviors and patterns, and
Hmm.
so immersed into that space of like just not knowing how to have healthy relationships, you know? And it was my own trauma, my own belief system. My core belief system was that I didn't think I was enough. So I spent much of my time just hiding the insecurities
Yeah.
behind the drugs, behind the alcohol, behind the body, and all that stuff, you know? So yeah, that was kind of like that intersection. That first really started the intersection was about 15 years ago with that first Reiki session. And then little by little, little by little, little by little. And it was every so often I would do a session with somebody or, you know, do this or this would be amazing. And it was like once, maybe twice a year, you know?
Mhm.
I always
So
found myself in those situations.
yeah, so as a man, it felt more
Mm,
comfortable for you to be like in the realm of physical health and developing that, even
yep.
though you always kind of had this deeper nudge towards
Yeah.
spirituality. And
Yeah.
Michael, you know you're not supposed to buy your own tarot cards, right?
But well, I found that out. I found that out later on.
You're like, I
I
didn't know
didn't think anything
shit
back.
then.
I didn't think anyone back then was going to purchase them for me. So,
You're like, I guess I just gotta get it done. I know it's
right,
I didn't know that either until someone told me. I was like, oh. So yeah, my friend one of my friends recently was like, ah, I really want a deck of tarot cards, but I guess I'm not allowed to get them for myself.
right,
All right, I got the hint.
right. You'll see probably up on my wall somewhere back there. I got like 3 shelves worth of tarot cards. You
Yeah.
know? Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Oh my God, I love that. Just like hearing the Boston accent from a man, like my
That
stepfather
just came
was
out so
bad.
heavily. It came out so heavily that I was like, oh my God, I think I just went cards. You know?
Yeah, there's something really refreshing about a spiritual male Boston accent. You don't get it
Mm,
often.
yeah, yeah. You know, I'm as real as they come because I've done so much work on myself that I've
Yeah.
stopped. I've literally got to the point where I was like, I've stopped hiding who I really am.
Yeah.
And I could care less what anybody thinks. And if you don't vibe with me, I don't care. It's okay. Because guess what? I don't take anything personally. We're
Yeah.
just not on the same wavelength. You go your way. Maybe we'll meet up in a few years. Who knows what life will bring? You know, that's
Yeah.
the kind of attitude I have now. It's like if you don't like me, if I rub you the wrong way, you probably want to look at yourself a little bit more than what you're looking at me. Don't project your stuff onto me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, that
I
type of stuff.
know. That took me a while to like get to that point. I think I definitely, and I'm always working on that, even like it's an ever evolving process. I think the fear of like judgment, even
Mm,
when you understand it's often a projection of someone else's limiting thinking,
right.
or maybe you just aren't on the same wavelength. There's all the ways that you ultimately know where it's stemming from, but
Hmm.
it's still such a hard, that was a huge piece of inner work for me with entrepreneurship and being like, you know what, especially like the sober curious realm was not really
Right.
like just starting to be a thing. And
Yeah.
and being like, oh, if I'm spiritual, can I not be like this? And then like if I'm like,
Right?
is that not spiritual enough? And just
Yeah.
realizing like, fuck that. I don't have to fit
Oh,
any boxes of what people like stereotype different things as, you know?
you know, what walking around spiritual. It like, and what I mean by that was when I first started this work, it was as if I had to be this, oh, let's all just take our voices down. Let's relax. Let's do this. And I'm sitting here going, well, that's just another mask. What the fuck is going on here? Like,
Yeah.
no, I'm going to be me. So now, even in my sessions where they can get really deep and really intense, guess what? I'm like, crack a joke, man. It's okay to laugh. This work is hard, but it doesn't have to be so difficult that you can't smile at yourself, that you can't have fun with it. Just know, like, this is all about you, you know? Laugh at yourself once in a while. It's okay. So
Mhm.
it's that piece of bringing in that authenticity to your work and realizing after so many years of hiding behind a multitude of masks and that entrepreneurship factor, like you're right, like the belief system, your confidence has to be so spot on to do this work with other people and to come across in such a way to say, you know, maybe the people listening right now, some of them are going to be like, oh, he's rubbing me the wrong way. That's okay. That's all right. Because it doesn't bother me. I
Yeah.
know what I'm here to do. You know what I mean? That I finally got to a place in my life where I feel so comfortable with the fact that I know who I am and I know what
And that alone is triggering for people. Just
massively,
massively. The more
massively.
I find like the more comfortable and confident you are, it is very triggering for people who aren't to that space yet. And it was
Mhm.
for me, to be honest, when I was deeply unhappy in my life and I was still drinking and I was working in hospitality and I
Right.
knew I wanted to be doing something more. I knew I had like more to offer, and I would get really jealous and like triggered seeing people put themselves out there. Like, I just started my business or doing this. And at the time,
Right.
I didn't even know that like that's what I wanted to do. But I just felt very triggered,
Yeah.
reflecting back. And I think I don't think I was horrible at projecting it. I think I knew a little bit like this is coming for me. And
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
was good at being like, I should be happy for this person, you know?
Yes. Exactly. Like, oh my God, they're really doing a good job. Like, come on, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Like
Yeah.
I'm just jealous because I actually kind of hate my life right now. And you know, you realize I think too with sober curiosity, and we can dig into that in a little bit, but
Sure.
just how um many people rely on alcohol to get comfortable in their own skin, and just how many people aren't comfortable in their own skin.
Oh,
And
I
that's
use alcohol.
that.
That's the reason why we all use alcohol, right? Is to
Mhm.
be comfortable in your own skin. And I even made that realization again when I went out on Friday night and we went to dinner and I'm sitting in this room and I'm and I'm listening to all this noise and I'm like, I don't have a drink. There's nothing that is protecting my energy from all of this stimulation, from all of this noise, from all of this energy. So now it comes down to me going inside and calming my own nervous system because I could feel my anxiety slightly creep up from all the stimulation. And I'm sitting there going, okay, so in the past, you would have had a tequila on the rocks and you would have already probably downed one before getting to the table.
Yeah.
It's
And
such a different circumstance today.
absolutely. And I think what most people don't realize is like that context is that like numbing of something that is naturally uncomfortable is can be extrapolated to so many ways that we use alcohol. Different
Right?
relationships that we're not meant to be in, different jobs
Yep.
we're not meant to be in. It just kind of smooths over the rough edges enough for us to tolerate what's actually not aligned in a lot of cases. And even
So
you know,
true.
being in situations where it's like, am I having fun right now? Like, would I be here if I wasn't drinking? That theme reoccurs
Yeah.
often with alcohol,
Yeah.
where it's like, would I be hanging out with this person? Would I be doing
Right?
this job every day? Would I live here? Like,
I look back and I'm like, if I had gone sober earlier on, it would have it would have been so different. So
hmm
different. Like there would have been so many people I would have never met. And that's I guess that's the funny thing that I say that now because it's like I live in a world for myself. My reality is like I don't really regret anything. I
hmm
really don't. I have a child who's almost 19. Do I regret a couple of things? Absolutely. I think that's just normal human behavior. You know what I mean? Could I have done certain things better? Absolutely. But for the most part, I'm like, no, I don't regret anybody that's crossed my paths, the relationships I've had, because there's no way I would have been able to be who I am today and what I and how I help clients and what I do today if it weren't for those experiences.
Yeah.
So I'm grateful that, as much as I said, I'm grateful that I drank a ton.
Yeah, I am
I'm not
too.
telling anybody to do that. I'm just grateful that it happened to me. And here's where I am today, that I don't need the drink, you know?
Exactly. And experiencing the depth of that pain is what makes like the healing energy you can provide so much more potent because people
Mhm.
know that you truly can relate to them. And that I think it provides a lot of hope to people to be like, oh, you were like in this state and now you're in this state. Like that alone
Right.
gives people faith in their own process of
Yep.
healing. If you had always
Yep.
been someone that was like super buttoned up, it might not be as relatable to clients.
Exactly.
And that's what I tell myself too. Like, I would never appreciate the peace I've created today if I did
Mhm.
not manufacture a shit ton of drama and chaos in my drinking life.
Like a shit ton, you know?
Shit ton.
Shit ton.
Unnecessary shit ton.
Same.
So okay, before we like fully dive into your sober curious journey,
Yeah.
I wanted to talk a little bit about like the perspective of the man on what you think is because like I said, I don't get to hear from a lot of men in this like realm
Sure.
on the podcast. And so I wanted to hear like what do you think are some of the biggest challenges when it comes to men for healing and doing the inner work and
Yeah.
working through their shit.
Working through this shit, right? So it's great that we're on this podcast right now and you're having me on right now because I just probed into our brotherhood this past Wednesday night. We have a brotherhood session every Wednesday night. One is online, one's in person. We're starting to expand those groups into other areas and stuff like that. And the big thing that we do in those groups is the inner work. And what's come up most recently in the last couple of months after really delving into like my brotherhood over the last year or so has been going through iterations. The most recent iteration that we're in is that depth of work, the shadow work, the inner child work. We're getting into the inner critic stuff. We're getting into like the meat of what we need for healing, right? And we find that there are a lot of men that are still having a challenge with that piece of things because they're still at the same time. I'm not saying all, but some are still having a problem with it because the emotional intelligence is not there just yet to completely understand it, one, and
Mm,
two, to start to go into that depth of it. And it's not quote unquote completely necessary for them to have that. They just need to trust the process. But men are skeptical in nature right up off the bat, right? That's just our nature. So what happens in the beginning is like if they don't see a clear cut path and they feel like they have to just trust their intuition and their creativity, which
mm,
comes from the feminine energy, right? And they're just kind of like, I'm in a place where it's really uncomfortable for me right now, and I don't know what to do. So when it comes to men and healing, it really becomes a state of getting them to a place where they're vulnerable, where they've opened up enough and shared with the people around them, with the brothers that they have shared with, they can trust to open up just a little bit more each time. So it allows us to get in there even deeper each time. That's
yeah.
the biggest challenge that we see with most men because you hear the stories all the time. Men don't cry, you know,
Mm,
men just shove shit under the rug. We're fine. We're fine. We got this. I'll take care of this. Don't worry. I got it. Don't worry. No, no, no. I got it. It's fine. Oh, you need, no, I got that too. And that's men. That's the typical. It's funny. I laugh at that because I find myself still doing that from time to time.
mm,
And I have a team of people that I can rely on. And I got brothers that I can rely on. And it's still sometimes a challenge for me to reach out, but we're pushing each other to do that. And you really have to have trust. These guys have to have trust in that because they have come from a place where they've been hurt and they've been jaded and they've locked themselves up inside. And the first thing a man wants to do, he wants to retreat and go into isolation. Anytime the going gets tough, a man retreats into isolation. nine times out of 10, a female will reach out to her sisters,
Hmm.
right? So that's usually what happens on that side of the scope. It's the complete opposite for men. We internalize, we go in, we're like, how can we deal with this? What are we going to do? We try to figure everything out on our own, you
Yeah.
know? So the biggest challenge is breaking that cycle for a man and helping them come out of that state and become more vulnerable. It's a challenge. It's definitely a challenge.
Yeah. I that really resonates with me about just the more feminine aspects, intuition, having faith, trust, leaning in. I think
Right.
that could be with masculine energy being the protector or,
The
I think
provider, the
a lot of
protector,
yeah,
the action taker, the go guy, the productivity, the structure,
right.
that's masculine energy. And when you take us out of that realm, and you put us into this area of feminine energy, it's a scary place. Now I say that, but personally me, and I find it with a few of the other brothers that I have in my brotherhood that we actually spent more of our time in the feminine.
Yeah. I
We
think a
found
lot of men
safety
are
in that.
craving it these days.
We're not
They're
just,
awakening.
yes,
Everyone is.
but there's safety in it. And funny enough, the majority of men that I coach one on one, when I ask them the question, take a look at your friends group. So who are your brothers that you can totally rely on? I get the, "Hmm, okay, well, do you have women in your life? Yeah. Okay, well, these are women that you go to. Yeah. I'm like, wait a minute. I have a I have a more women in my friend group than I do men.
Hmm.
And I'm like, because there's safety in that.
Hmm.
You find comfort in that. You find nurturing in that. That's actually telling you exactly what you need is you need the nurturing, you need the flow, you need the creativity, you need the love, the support, and you're not getting it. You're not giving it to yourself, number one, and you're not getting it and you're not letting it in. But funny enough, it's sitting all around you. The universe is trying to give it to you, indirectly. It's sitting right there, but you won't allow it in.
Hmm.
And men, like for myself and a few of my other brothers that I have in the brotherhood, we have what's called the brother wound, and it's probably the same for the sister wound,
Yeah.
right? We've all been jaded by guys. Like guys have been jaded by guys. I've had guys like tell me certain things to my face that I'm like, wow. So in those moments, subconsciously, we peel ourselves away from the men, and we're like, we can't trust men. We can't trust them to be there for us when they need to be because they're gonna literally screw us over. They're gonna stab us in the back. I've gone through many of those experiences over my life. And then looking back, I'm like, wow, there's no wonder why I had more women in my life. And today it's a good 50-50 split, which is beautiful because men need men just as much as women need women, men need men.
Yeah.
And some of the healing that men do cannot be done with women. It
Hmm.
is very, it, we, we express in a very different way. We share in a very different way, right? We speak different languages, right? But the expression of our healing can come across very primal.
Yeah. One thing I think is interesting is like with communication, and my husband and I always talk about this because
Mhm.
he's like, this is just how I communicate. I'm animated. And I'm like, that's way too much for me. Like,
Right,
I
right,
feel like you are screaming at me right now. And
right.
I feel
He's
like,
not.
yeah, and I feel like sometimes like that, what do you suggest for people with just when people have that more like intense masculine energy where
Mhm.
it come and I know I'm like highly sensitive, I'm very in my
Sure.
feminine and I try to, you know, account for that. And so what do you say to people who are like men and women if they're having the conflict in differing
Mm.
manners of communication where it's like he thinks
Sure.
he's being what he always uses the word animated.
Right?
Animated, and I'm like,
I use passionate.
really animated.
Yeah. I use passionate. I'm very passionate, you know?
Yeah. And I'm like, this is a little too animated for me because I'm shutting down. And so
Right.
I find like he feels like I'm really sensitive and I feel like he's like angry. And
Sure.
it's funny because we love like Bill Burr, the comedian. Do you know
Oh
him?
yeah, of
Yeah,
course.
yeah. He's
He's
like,
great.
he doesn't drink anymore either. And he's always talking about like him and his wife have a similar
Hmm.
dynamic. And he's like, she's always telling me, like, you go from 0 to 100 in like 5 seconds. And he's like, honey, I idle at 70. I'm not going from 0 to 100 if I'm already at
Right?
50 at my baseline.
Yep.
It's
It's so
funny
true.
that resonates so much to me with him because I'm like, how are you perfectly peaceful? And then the next minute you're like so like up in
Hmm.
arms about something. I'm like, that
Yeah.
doesn't seem like you should be able to switch. Like something must be underlying that. And he's like, no, I'm
Right.
fine. I'm like, you're fine?
Yeah. That's the constant learning, especially for a man. I'll speak to it from a man's point of view.
Yeah.
That's the constant learning of how to communicate and become emotionally intelligent, right? So in that moment, you have to step more into your feminine to do that, and that's a really scary place for a lot of guys, you
Yeah.
know? So there's you. I'm not saying you can't learn emotional intelligence as a man, but you do have to step into your feminine to do it. I had to step into my feminine extremely heavily about 2 years ago and 3 years prior. So between the 5 and 2 years ago mark, right? I had to step extremely heavily into my feminine because I went through a really deep, deep, deep healing stage in my life. I couldn't do that in my masculine. It was an automatic response, and I didn't even know it was happening that I stepped foot into the feminine energy. Now, after those few years of really sitting heavily in that feminine energy, coming out of that feminine and pulling myself out slowly to get more into my healed masculine, right? Because I had to heal the toxic masculine or the behaviors and the pattern that went along with it, right? And step into that healed masculine state. Man, that was so challenging and so difficult because I could feel myself stepping into that masculine and feeling that masculine energy again. And I'm like, this is a little scary right now. I
Yeah.
don't know if this is what guys really go through, but this is actually a little terrifying because I don't want to be that guy that I was.
And it
Like
feels
all I can,
familiar, but you're like nervous.
it felt familiar because I could feel the masculine energy, but it also felt very much like, well, this does feel different. Okay, I need to trust. I just need to be in that space. And it just came with that emotional intelligence, that understanding. So the dynamic between even the fights or disagreements, I call them disagreements, little debates between me and my girlfriend, um, was pretty much like, especially these days, we talk. There's no arguing.
Mhm.
There's very, very little of that. And it's because we've both come to a certain point in our lives where the emotional intelligence has been developed in both of us so that we can communicate from a place of not taking it personally, so that the anger doesn't creep up or the sadness doesn't creep up or whatever underlying tone is sitting there doesn't creep up. And even if it does, we're able to address it and look at each other and be like, hey, I'm actually feeling a little angry right now. And I'm not quite sure why, but I want to talk it out. Here's what happened with us 10 minutes ago. Oh, and we're starting to figure it out. We see the pattern,
Mhm.
right? But it's this place where you have to dive into that feminine for guys. And I'll just say it, guys, you got to hop into your feminine. You know, it can be a scary place, but that's where your healing's going to occur because it's nurturing, it's supportive, it's creative, and it's loving. Right? Women naturally, you're emotional creatures,
Yeah.
right? And you can hold space for that kind of healing, and that's where we need to do our healing. But then there's the other realm where brothers have to come together and do that other side of the healing.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense because I think just kind of in terms of our nervous system, it seems more in alignment with
Mhm.
qualities that are associated with the feminine. In order to
Yes.
like really heal and move through things, we kind of need to have a regulated, calm nervous system.
Hmm. Yep.
And a feminine seems to be supportive of that. And when we're talking about feminine and masculine, for everyone listening, we're talking about like archetypal energy,
Yeah.
really associated with
So
gender.
important.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so it's like the feminine, nurturing, loving,
Yeah.
creative, intuitive, and then
Right.
masculine is protector, defender, productive,
Right.
action
Right.
oriented, results, and whereas
It's,
feminine is more process oriented,
yeah.
and they
It's
complement each
important.
other.
It's important for you to bring that up and actually break it down that way because people are probably getting triggered right now just listening to this because they're like, men, women, what? We're not talking about the actual male or female. We're talking about the archetype, right?
Yeah,
And that's
yeah,
so, because every one of us has both. That's
right.
what's important to know is that men have masculine, but they also have feminine energy that they can tap into when they need it. And women, the exact same thing. And we know a lot of women today, especially since the 50s and 60s, when they, the gear shifted and women started to become started going to work and started bringing home the money and started taking care of their households and stuff like that. They dove into their masculine state. So we know that both of us have those energies. How they play out, we get to actually choose
Yeah.
if we're aware enough.
Yeah, such an interesting topic. I love this one because it is what you were saying. Like most men probably need to tap into their feminine more. And because our society is so hyper masculine, most of us
Mm-hmm.
probably need like to tap into our feminine energy to heal. And because those qualities are more symbiotic with a calm nervous system.
Yes.
But then there's also lots of women who like need to tap into their masculine for qualities
Mm-hmm.
like people pleasing and martyrdom
Oh,
savior complexes and all of these things where it's like you need more masculine, you need more
yeah.
boundaries, you need to have stick up for yourself, you need to like
It's
voice
even for
your
men.
opinion.
Yeah, it's even for men too. Like we people pleasers, we need to stick up for ourselves. We get run over. It's it's the same on both sides. It just
Yeah,
shows up slightly differently for men and women. But we
yeah,
go through the exact same things. We really do, and the majority of my relationships in the past, I was a people pleaser. And I was a people pleaser because I just wanted to just tell me that I'm enough. Just
yeah,
tell me that I'm enough. Tell me that you believe in me because I don't believe in myself, you
yeah.
know? So I was
Same.
looking for that external validation. Right, exactly. So we all go through it. Doesn't matter if you're male or female. But from the guy's point of view, yes, we have to tap into that feminine. But then there comes a point, and it came from me where I received as much as I could from the feminine to gain that healing. But then I need to step into the masculine and be with other men that could offer another type of healing.
Mm-hmm.
Men, we push each other, man. There's nothing like a man looking at you and calling you forward. So in our brotherhood, we use a term calling forward, not calling you out. Because if we're calling you out, then we're just calling you out, ridiculing you. When we call you forward, we're asking you to step into that leader, that healed masculine, that version of yourself that you so want to be. So we call you forward into that space. And
Mm-hmm.
it's so important because women don't do that piece of things. You'll hold space and it's beautiful and it's nurturing and it's loving. But then there's that other side of the corner. Men literally look at each other and be like, yo, brother,
You're being a
you
little
are not,
bit.
yeah, you're not doing it. You're not coming into your healing. You're not doing the work. Why? And we will put you on the spot. we
Mm-hmm.
will we will help you and facilitate that process for you, you know so it's important to
Yeah.
have both.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it is so important. And it's like each person's degree of which they need to lean into is their own individualized medicine, depending on,
Mhm.
you know, generally speaking, it's like what you were saying, like men kind of need to lean into their feminine, and that can be like generalized by gender a little bit, but then each
Yes.
individual person, depending on whatever patterns are coming up for them,
Hmm.
and it's like evaluating, like, do I need a little bit more of like
Yeah,
this medicine or that
I
medicine?
know
Find
plenty of
balance.
women. Yeah, I know plenty of women that need some more feminine. They're
Yeah.
very heavily set in their masculine and they can use
Oh yeah.
that feminine to heal. So again, it's not about male female, it's about the archetype, it's about the energy that lies behind that.
The yin and the yang.
Yin
Finding
and
your
yang, you got
perfect
it.
like melding of
Yep.
those.
Yep.
Yeah. So okay, so while we're on this topic, I
Sure.
I love and because it is so in alignment with this idea of like societal conditioning. And when you think of just all of our societal programming in general around men and expectations of men and the roles that we expect men to fill, what parts of our societal conditioning do you think are most hindering for men specifically?
Oh, the amount of pressure that we have
Mm,
as men in our society when it comes to the roles that we have to play. And I say have to because many men think they have to play the role, right? They have to be the protector, they have to be the provider. It's been ingrained in us since we were kids. Like, you're going to grow up to be a man. What's a man? And the first thing we think of when we think of being a man is protection, providing. That means if we're going to work, then we're making enough money so that it can support our household. The household, the business, the kids, whatever's going on. That means there's money left over. That means if there's not enough, then you don't feel like a man. You're not enough of a man. So it's this pressure that we have on ourselves in our society to perform and achieve and go, go, go all the time. And it doesn't allow us to slow down and reflect and say, what do we really want in our lives? And are we aligned with what we're actually doing? There's so many men that I work with between the ages of 40 and I would say even close to 60, 62, right? It's a big age gap, but this is just what happens. I'm going to be 51 in a couple of days. And I woke up one day in my life and I looked myself in the mirror and I'm like, whoa, like
mm.
I got some more whites and I got what's happening and like who are you? Like, where did you come from? Like, it's happening. But then all of a sudden you wake up one morning and be like, what am I doing with my life? Did I even choose my life? And so many men go through this. So many of the men that I coach go through this. Every single one of them wakes up one day and goes, what have I done with my life? What am I doing? Where am I going? I need to stop. This is the midlife crisis. So when people say that there's a midlife crisis, there's a couple of different ways you can handle it. You can go out and buy a Porsche, or you can reflect. So
Yeah, it's like, is it a midlife crisis or just a spiritual awakening where you realize you've been building
correct,
your entire life around external measures of success instead of your
right
own?
there, right there. For me, it was all about achieving, achieving, achieving. At one point, I was very successful in business early on in those first couple of years, but business also tanked at one point because I self-sabotaged myself because of my internal belief system. Right? Then I had to pick up the pieces again. It took some time to do that, and here I am, and I'm building. And I'm
Hmm.
doing it again. And I'm doing it in a completely different way. And I'm doing it very much aligned. And I take the time. I actually, if there's any big decisions, I actually take time to myself and I go in and reflect. It's not like I will drop into sixth gear and like I'm driving 150 miles an hour. No, I slow it down to realize, like, okay, well, I can make this decision, but is it going to be aligned with what I'm doing and what I'm creating right now? And
Hmm.
that's tapping into the feminine. That's allowing that space.
One thing I notice with some of my male clients is this constant pursuit of things that are productive. And I am always telling them it doesn't need to be productive to be meaningful. In fact, some of the least productive things, in quotes, are the most productive actually,
Yeah,
because they are going to allow you to produce things that are more aligned when you sit in
exactly.
stillness and prioritize stillness, being, reflection, slowing down.
Mm-hmm.
You
Yep.
move forward with intention and you're more efficient, you're more
Yep.
productive, you're more aligned.
Yep.
And
You'll notice the couch is behind me. Obviously, that's my coaching, right? And that's the area that I utilize for my clients, but that's also the area that I utilize to reflect and chill for a minute. And today was a super intense, productive morning, right? Now I got to the point where I was like, okay, so I did this, and I came in really hot when I got back to work because I was out in a couple business meetings and stuff like that, and things were going really well, and we're going to do some great stuff. We got a lot of cool events coming up, and I come back to the studio here, and I'm coming in hot, and I'm coming into my masculine energy. I'm coming into my action energy, right? But I know what's happening. I can sense it in myself, and I said, okay, well, the next thing I got coming up is I'm going to be on Katie's podcast. And I'm like, I need to take myself down a minute. And
Hmm.
so, okay. And I looked at Courtney and I said, hey, I'm going to take a minute. I'm just going to chill on the couch. And I just dropped in. And I was like, okay, I'm just going to settle in. And then all of a sudden, I'm like, okay, well, I can't get too comfortable because now I'm getting tired, you know, and I'm getting tired now. And then I kind of shifted gears a little bit to balance my energy out between both the masculine and the feminine. Okay, I still have to do, but I know I need to be here for myself. So where's the self care? So I was able to start to balance that out. And right back there, sitting on my couch, just hanging out, and
Hmm.
took that hour that I needed, knowing that I could reflect on the day and go, I was successful today. And I don't have to do any more if I don't want to. Not right now, because I got more coming up this afternoon. Take a minute for yourself. That's a hard thing to do. Just filling your day with just stuff until you get to the end of the day. And then your partner looks at you and it's like, how was your day? Oh my God, so busy. What'd you get done? I don't know.
I know. That is the most
It's
relatable of
typical.
all relatable things where people, you work yourself into a frenzy
Yeah.
about everything you need to do, and you don't realize that you're coming at it with this energy that's actually making everything take longer.
Right.
And I always think of like when I start getting that like multitasking, frenzied energy, I'm like, nope, single pointed focus. What are you
That's it.
doing right now? Finish what you're doing, move on to the
Yeah.
next thing. Stop trying to think of like you start doing something. I'm like in it midway through an email, then like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
it's like, no, I am
No.
not allowing myself to chase my tail all goddamn
No.
day.
No. The thought popped into my head when I came in hot today, but then all of a sudden I was like, no, bring it back out.
Yeah.
You know what you need to do. And that's practice. Like people out there are probably going to listen to this and they're like sitting there going, well, how do I do that? It's practice. Like anything else, it's practice. You go to the gym and you work out, that's practice, right? It's repetition over and over. Like everybody's like, well, what's the magic pill? What's this? What's that?
Yeah.
Oh, I hate to break it to you people, but there's really no magic pill other than just
Consistency is the
doing it.
magic pill.
That's it right there. No joke. That word, I use it all the time.
Consistency and long periods of time is the
Yes.
magic pill. And
Yeah.
I talk with people about this endlessly with, drinking and
Hmm.
um their sober curious path, and like it's gonna
Right.
get worse before it gets better. And I think once you can embrace that and stop expecting something to happen really quickly, you
Hmm.
will feel more peaceful through the process, and just being
Absolutely.
able to like commit yourself to every day and knowing that they add up instead of just thinking, and I think especially with the rise in sober curiosity and so many
Hmm.
people like talking about how much better their lives are without
Right.
drinking. And then some clients are like, this fucking sucks. I'm like, yeah, I know it does really suck in the beginning because
It
guess
will.
what?
It will. For a little bit, it
Yeah,
will.
yeah, it
But even that
will.
was a practice.
Yeah. Okay, that's one thing I did want to talk about with you too is
Sure.
this is all such good stuff, Michael.
I love it. I
So,
love it. I'm having a good time.
yeah, so fun. I want to hear about your own sober curious path and
Mm,
how that wove in and kind of how it started, how it's been going.
sure. I think where I want to start is this is also coming from somebody who could down a bottle of tequila in one night.
Me too. I didn't
Yeah.
down a bottle of tequila, but I was definitely
Yeah.
like the gremlin booze hound
Yeah.
crazy girl.
Right. And that was me. I was the crazy guy. Everybody
Yeah.
loved hanging out with me because you just didn't know what you were going to get next, you
Yeah.
know? Um, yeah, the sober curiosity. Oh, let's see. I look back and I've been with my girlfriend now for almost 4 years. And I
Mhm.
bring that up because that's the time period where I really started to shift in this mentality. And for, about a year into our relationship, I started saying out loud to her, I don't want to drink anymore. I really don't want to drink. Like, I don't like the way I feel in the morning. I don't want to drink. And then I would find myself drinking again. It'd be a Thursday afternoon or a Friday afternoon. Be like, oh, it's 2 o'clock on a Friday afternoon. I'm getting out of the office and whoo, I can't wait to go home, sit on the deck, hang out, have a tequila. And then I would find myself back again, saying it again, saying it again, saying it again, saying it again. And then it got to not this past summer, last summer, 2023. And prior to that summer, I was really slowing down on the drinking. And I could tell. And even my girlfriend, she was like, wow, you're slowing down. And then we had, some friends that we're hanging around with a little bit more frequently and stuff like that. And the drinking picked back up. And I was like, wow, like it picked back up to the nth degree. And I was like, I don't like, it was great. It was fun. Like I don't regret any of it. You know what I mean? It was a blast.
Mm.
But I knew that I wasn't in that space of wanting to drink it, you know? And I was like, I really don't want to drink. So I guess shit, man, I'm gonna have to make some really fucking tough decisions here. And what do I want in my life? And who do I want in my life? And how do they resonate and how do they align? And I hate to say it, but you do end up severing some ties. And it sucks, because some people are not ready for it, or it just is what it is. So I ended up going down that road of severing some ties. The fall, I would say I probably like the fall of 23, I drank very, very little. And my last drink at one point was December 25th,
Mm.
Christmas Day. I had a tequila. My sister poured it for me. And I was like, yeah, sure, I'll take one. And I didn't I didn't drink half of it. I left it there.
Hmm.
Didn't even get through a whole tequila. Didn't even get through half a tequila. And that was the last time for months.
Hmm.
This past summer, we went to a concert, and I was like, there was something in me that was like, do you have the control? I wanted to test myself. There was something in me that said, I know I don't need this. I don't know. I know I don't want it in my body, but was I really addicted? Or was it because of my bullshit and my trauma
Hmm.
that caused me to
I
drink?
wonder
So,
that sometimes too.
right. And I tested myself, and I had a beer, and I was like, okay, cool. That was okay, whatever. That was it. Like, I don't have the urge. I don't have the craving. I don't have any of that anymore. I was drawn to drinking because the underlying tone for me, as I found out later on in life, and honestly over the last couple of years, is that I had anxiety
Yeah,
and
same.
I was self-soothing,
Yeah.
and I had no fucking clue that that was the case. Like, I used to look at people that used to say to me, like, oh, I have anxiety. I'm like, what the hell is anxiety? Like, I know what you're saying when you say anxiety, but I don't know what that feels like. Yet,
Well,
little did I know that I was constantly soothing my anxiety because that's what was coming up for me. I just would never let it get to that point,
yeah.
you
I
know?
think too, a lot of people who have had like, traumatic experiences early on, they just don't know any different and their baseline is anxious.
Hmm.
And then
Yeah,
also like add on to that or conditioning around alcohol, which is like pretty
yeah.
much giving you the green light to drink for everything from anxiety to joy.
Hmm. Yeah,
Unless you're like an alcoholic, which is a
right,
objective, and it's usually pretty extreme criteria that we're basing that on, like you're ruining your life, and it's just,
right. I mean, look, it could trigger a ton of people right now, but you know what? I know you don't start off as being an alcoholic. I
hmm.
know that's not the baseline. I know that people are more predisposed to being addicts and stuff like that. But
Yeah.
I think that also comes from a traumatic point of view, right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if you follow Dr. Gabor Mate,
Oh yeah,
right?
I love him.
Amazing. He will look you dead in the face and be like, ADHD, ADD, alcoholism, addiction. It's all trauma based. It's a coping mechanism, right? And I've
Yeah.
found coping mechanisms in all those things between drugs and alcohol, food, sex, work, phone, whatever I can get my hands on to escape, I used them, you
Yeah.
know? that
Yeah.
that was the whole thing. So for me, it wasn't about alcohol. It was about curbing my anxiety and forgetting about my problems. Once I
Yeah.
dealt with my problems and dealt with my trauma and dealt with my anxiety, I didn't want anything.
Yeah,
I
you
didn't
don't
need
want
anything.
I know that's why I talk so much about root cause healing. And I always, I definitely subscribe a little bit more to like Gabor Mate's line of thinking, where I think it's like a combination of trauma and a sick society. I know the disease model is like somewhat like antiquated at this point. I
Right.
think we probably have genetic predispositions, but
Sure.
there's actually no like alcoholism gene. I think like they've
Right.
said it's kind of maybe like impulsivity or this or that, like tendencies that could lend
Yeah.
up to that, but it's
Sure.
not that alone. And then when we think of
Yeah.
genetics, like, oh, my mom was an alcoholic, it's like, yeah, but that just same thing with obesity, right? Like
Right.
Yeah, but your mom was overweight, but like then that was the diet that you were exposed to. So
Exactly. So was
that
it
is
nature
half
versus
the
nurture?
environment. Yeah.
Right. Yep.
And same
So
thing in the
true.
drinking, like that's the patterns of drinking you
Hmm.
saw. So if you saw your parent, like who was an alcoholic, cope with alcohol, that's what
Yeah.
you're exposed to. That's what
And you're
you're,
going to be driven towards that. I saw my dad. He smoked when I was a kid. I picked up smoking a little later in life, with teenage years, late teenage years. I smoked on and off. Okay. I smoked. Somebody could say, well, like you picked that habit up from him. And then I was like, was it just curbing my anxiety though? Like it was all these little things of like, why did I do what I did? And guess what, guys? Why don't I need it anymore? Gabor mate, Matt is like he's literally telling you, I've lived exactly what he speaks. That's why I resonate with his message so much, is
Mhm.
because I don't look at myself as an alcoholic. I don't subscribe, as you say, to that notion that like once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic. Could I have been referred to as an alcoholic before? Absolutely, absolutely. Am I
Yeah.
an alcoholic? No, I'm not.
Yeah.
You
Yeah, I'm
know,
sure many people are probably like, "Oh, she has like a little problem with drinking." And I think, there is some ways we can more subjectively define it, like physical dependency or not, but I think that
right?
is actually more limiting than anything else because we do describe it as like, oh, if we do limit it to like these are the criteria it's disempowering to the individual to evaluate like in their own life how is it serving them, and that's
Yeah,
really what I try to get across to clients is like your programming around alcohol is based in such a toxic place just because our society normalizes toxic drinking
right.
in so many ways, like self-medication, binge
Yep.
drinking, mommy wine culture. There's like a million examples
Right.
of
So true.
how
So
we normalize toxic drinking. And if that's the programming you're subscribing to, then like that is outside of you and being
yeah,
like, how is this serving me? Why am I waking up with anxiety every day and then convincing myself I don't have a problem because I'm not like getting a divorce and I didn't just get a DUI, but I'm waking up with crippling anxiety. Like that is the
exactly.
problem.
Yeah. Yeah. So true.
But yeah. So nowadays, can you share like what do you feel? And this will be my last question before we wrap up.
Sure.
I know we're running out of time, but
Yeah,
I
yeah.
want to ask like what do you feel has been the biggest like shift you've noticed since eliminating alcohol in your personal life and professional life?
My focus, my drive, my passion for life, my wow, I can just roll those things right off the tip of my tongue, right? Yeah, it's my ability to take a look at everything in my life these days from a completely new set of eyes and just find the beauty in it.
Mm-hmm.
Like even in places where people are going through some of the most difficult challenges, and sometimes maybe I'm still going through difficult things here and there in my life, right? I still find the beauty in it. I still am able to pull myself away from the chaos of it and look at it from an outside perspective, almost as the observer. Even being the experiencer at the same time, I'm able to pull myself back and be the observer in this moment and be like, okay, well, what do I need right now? you know? So for me, it's really about just seeing the beauty in life, seeing it all. And I don't want to miss out on that anymore. I
Yeah.
missed out on so much of it. Like I look back and I'm like, I can't remember certain things. That's really shitty to say. Like I've gone out certain nights. I've blacked out 3 times in my life. Like who wants to say they blacked out and woke up in a car in a parking lot with half their body hanging outside of the car, and they don't know how they got there, and nobody's in the car. Nobody else is there. Like how does I have no idea. And it's like I don't want to have those experiences anymore. I want
Yeah.
to be able to know exactly where I am, what I'm going through, and feel everything that's happening in the moment. Like I love feeling today. That's
Mm-hmm.
what I was running from back then. Today, I actually run to it. Like tell me what this feels like. I want to experience it.
Yeah, that's such a good way of describing it. Like you don't want to escape yourself anymore. And one thing I think is really powerful that I always like asking people because I think, especially working with clients and at their initial stages of developing their awareness around alcohol and
Mhm.
like just how how limiting your perspective is from that side. And for me, before I stopped drinking, my sober curiosity evolved. Like I would do dry months and like
Sure.
every time I was like, I'm on to something here. But I didn't really have the courage to like jump full in until,
Right.
2020. And so, but I often think like, what would I have told myself, then? Because I feel so differently now. So if you could reflect back to yourself kind of when you were drinking and probably had no intention of not drinking, or maybe thinking that that is not your path or you're uninterested in that, or it would be really limiting or boring, all of the things, what
Sure.
would you tell yourself from this side of the
From
track?
this perspective,
Yeah.
um, it's so much more fun than what you thought. It's not as boring as what you thought,
Yeah.
and that you can have a better life on this side of the fence than what you thought.
Mhm. Yeah. Yep. It's the truth. That's the truth right there.
The
It
truth.
is. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, I wish sometimes, I'm like, you always try to find, with clients, like the perfect
Mhm.
thing to say to them, to
Yes.
like, or question to ask, to
Right.
just get them to give themselves a chance, because
Sure.
that faith and intuition you were talking about earlier, I think many of us deep down really know the changes that we need to make to step into our most content,
Oh,
authentic human
absolutely.
self.
Yeah.
But it's like it's hard to do it, and we don't have guaranteed evidence that it's going to make our lives better. So we like really do have to have faith. And so that is definitely, it's just really empowering for people to hear, I think, from the other side, that it is,
It's,
it
yeah,
can be
it's
long.
trying it out for that, like you said, do you do that month or you do that couple of weeks? You know what? Just try it. And you know what? Just set a limit on yourself. You say, I'm going to do this for 3 months. At the time, I didn't know that I was just going to be like, I don't want to ever drink again. Like, I
Hmm.
really don't, I have no urge to. I could care less if I ever touch another drop of alcohol in my life. One, I know that I don't need it. Two, I know that if I did pick one up and have a drink, I wouldn't need another one.
Hmm.
And that was the test I had to go through for myself. So
Yeah.
just
It's
give
like
yourself 3 months.
when you get to the point where you wouldn't have more than one drink because you've done the
Right.
healing work, and then you're like, I don't even really want that one anymore.
That
Like,
that's literally what happened to me. I'm like, I don't even know why I had that. Like I didn't need it,
yeah,
you
I
know?
know. And it's like, well, that would be like the ideal relationship with alcohol.
Yeah, and I have it finally because I had a really horrible relationship with alcohol.
Yeah, yeah, it's a lot. And one thing I've been talking recently, and I'll kind of like wrap it up from here, is this idea that sober curiosity too is like progressive. And if you
Mhm.
don't feel like you're ready to just like stop drinking altogether, every
Right.
time you take a break, every time, it's not like one and done, like, oh, took a month off, I didn't solve
Right.
all my problems. It's like every time you do it, you develop self-awareness, you learn
Hmm.
more, you realize that maybe some of your thinking was a little more limited than you thought, and like new layers unfold. And so just keep at it.
Yeah, it's perfect. I love it.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being on. I wanted to,
Thank you for having me.
lastly, I always like to let people like give a shout out about where people can find them on social media, in person, the
Hmm.
Danvers Wellness Center, website, all
Sure.
that stuff.
You got it. So they can find us at danverswellnesscenter.com. You can type in Wellness Center Danvers. We should come up pretty top there on the Google searches. Um, we're on Instagram. We're on Facebook under Danvers Wellness Center. My personal Instagram is at my first name and last name, Michael LoColle, LoColle. Our info at email is info at soul, SOUL, warriorconsulting.com. But through our website, you can get in touch with us pretty quickly.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for being on.
Thank
And
you for having me.
who listened, make sure you go find Michael on Instagram. And if you're in the North Shore area, check out Danvers Wellness Center and like, subscribe, and share this episode if it resonates with you. Bye. Thanks for tuning in.